Hey everybody, welcome to our session and thanks for coming. The topics of, I hope you enjoyed the event, REMARS. There were so many moonshot projects, moonshot presentations, and now I want all of you to get back to the earth and really talk through the real enterprise problems and issues throughout the journey from point A to point B and all the decisions that have been made and all the decisions that have to be made. Let's talk about that. Today's topic is PepsiCo's business transformation through data and machine learning. For the sake of introductions, I'm Stepan, Provectus CEO and co-founder. My background is in data and machine learning. I've been working with AWS and I've been working with PepsiCo, one of our partner and customer, for the last few years. And I'm happy to co-present with my colleague, Russell.
My name is Russell Lamb. Call me Russ. I'm the e-commerce retail data engineering lead at PepsiCo. I have been in the industry of data engineering for over 20 years. At PepsiCo for just over a year and a half. But what I've seen at PepsiCo in terms of what we've built in data platform and machine learning is just really one of the best that I've ever seen. It's sophisticated, and what I'd like to share with all of you is some of the choices we made and how that has benefited our firm and how it can benefit yours. So about the PepsiCo business. PepsiCo was founded in 1965 as a merger between Pepsi-Cola and Frito-Lay companies. The product portfolio includes a wide range of food and beverages from Lay's, Fritos, Gatorade, Pepsi, Quaker Oats, and more. We've got 23 brands generating over $1 billion in revenue each, more than 260,000 employees, and products that are enjoyed over 200 countries and territories, as well as customers enjoying over 1 billion products a day. So it's ubiquitous. PepsiCo is everywhere except Amazon REMARS, unfortunately for me. But it is a huge brand with a lot of problems or challenges that we face.
Following the introductions, quick facts about Provectus. So Provectus is an AWS premier partner specialized in machine learning, data, and DevOps. Our mission is to leverage cloud, data, and AI to reimagine the way businesses operate, compete, and deliver customer value. We work on the hardest problems in the world, like simulating supernova explosion using deep learning models, as well as on some applied AI projects like optimizing supply chain for customers like PepsiCo. But this talk is not about Provectus. Let's jump into the content. And so motivation of this talk and what I hope you're gonna learn at the end of this session. So it is relevant for the enterprises starting their cloud, data, and AI transformation, and it provides very practical, very tactical recipes and architectural decisions and advice and playbooks for you to make alongside your journey. So again, it is not a rocket science talk. We're not going to talk deep learning. We're not going to talk generative adversarial networks. Let's talk about the real challenges that enterprises face, and we will try to generalize PepsiCo experience and make sure that your industries, your enterprises can benefit from the recipes and playbooks that we're going to share with you.
And this is something that I'm very passionate about too. I think that considerations you need to make for radical technology change within an enterprise culture, it's not easy. People are used to doing things a certain way, planning long in advance before anything is actually done or usable. But I think that we've got some great examples of automation and machine learning that we've brought to the table.
Good. So session-wise, we're going to structure it the following way. We'll try to answer the why question, why companies like Pepsi should start their journey. Then we quickly talk through the strategy, some decisions, management decisions that has been made to make it happen. Talk through the use cases, impactful use cases that really brought value back to the business. We'll walk through the platform, some key components and decisions, and hopefully we're going to share very useful lessons learned and outcomes with you.
Yeah, one of the goals of PepsiCo taking on this initiative is to achieve PepsiCo's broader vision of being a global leader in convenient food and beverages by winning with purpose. And one of the emerging trends in the CPG industry is online e-commerce. E-commerce is a large growing channel. If you can think of examples like e-convenience, such as Instacart and DoorDash, you might use maybe during the pandemic. In-store pickup, right? That's become popular, where you order something online, you go drive to the store, they deliver it to your car. That's considered e-commerce. And really, any purchase that happens electronically that's not through an in-person venue. And the speed of e-commerce requires fast decision making. It's a new landscape for retailers to embark on. It requires new sources of data, like direct to consumer, partnering with our retailers directly to get their data. And previously, before we had e-commerce, we were dependent largely on data aggregators for point of sale data. And so this is a new frontier where we can use more granular data and do more with machine learning and automation. The finer grain really improves our understanding of our consumer behavior and how they interact with our products.
Great. And generalizing this approach, you all know that Amazon's mission is to create the most consumer, customer-focused company in the world. So, and you see the successful role model in looking at the Amazon. And what we see industry trend-wise, most of the enterprises, manufacturing, automotive, CPG, retail, healthcare, they're becoming more and more customer-focused. And they build their strategies around consumer, not about brand, not about product, but about consumer. So this is really important mindset shift in the strategy, and it unlocks so many use cases. That it unlocks, even if you talk about supply chain, you optimize your supply chain to get the right product on the shelf in the right time for the right specific consumer. So again, it's not an operational use case. If you think about this, even operational use cases from the consumer standpoint, it becomes much more coherent in terms of your strategy. So moving with some management decisions that has been made to kick it off in the beginning. I think it was 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, so PepsiCo's strategy is really that the technology goals should be focused on business drivers, right? So operate as one team working towards a common outcome, as opposed to sales teams doing this and technology is doing that. Really working together and integrating those goals and drivers. E-commerce is a new department that brought a new way of operating. So PepsiCo decided to use this opportunity to try new approaches to technology, like AWS. There's a focus on speed and agility, and cloud technologies enabled lean software development. The agility of cloud technologies enables a rapidly changing business like e-commerce. Establishing trust early by delivering value quickly really integrates it serves to integrate those units, right? Business conditions change quickly, so technology must also. And open tools leverage the power of community while empowering teams. So if the source is open, you can change it and contribute to it, and it just enables, fast forwards a lot of the work that you would either otherwise have to do in-house. Our strategic partners like AWS and Perfectus, I think that was another big choice that we made, a great choice, because we really needed to get expertise in this technology quickly.
Yeah, let's quickly expand on this item. So what does it actually mean for PepsiCo and overall for the industry? So there is a conventional approach how you modernize your enterprise. There is, you start with a migration, you migrate your workloads, then you modernize, then maybe in a couple of years you build some data infrastructure, and in 3 or 4 years you may have some applications back to the business. So in PepsiCo, we did it differently, and that was one of the management decisions that has been made. Work backwards from the use cases. Don't spend time on like endless migration cycles, modernization cycles of the legacy software. Build the use cases, replicate necessary data, have the data platform ready in like 2-3 months, and literally start building the use cases. That's in general, that's the advice I want to share with all of you. So you can reverse that paradigm and from the IT-centric to the use case-centric approach.
Yeah, to expand a little bit or talk a little bit about the e-commerce challenge. So that group was developed as a startup within a large enterprise. Within a startup, you have all of the business units that are relevant, right? Sales, marketing, supply chain, as well as technology. Everyone working side by side towards that common goal. I think that it's important to give that, what was important in this case was to give that team full authority and autonomy in decision making in terms of our technology choices so that we weren't bogged down by decisions made in the past, legacy systems and so forth. And that our challenges are really, or what we work on is driven by business challenges that our colleagues bring to us or that we observe and strategic choices, not technology for the sake of technology. We're fully integrated. We measure our technology success in terms of business success. It's not really how many models did you build or how many pipelines did you automate, but it's about how much sales did you deliver with these tools.
Yeah, I would like to echo this. We work with many enterprises, and each of the enterprise has this center of excellence or innovation group that does a nice prototypes and technologies, and then try to sell it to business units. Try to look for the budget. In my experience, it never works. It's just a waste of time, a waste of money. So build the fully functional or business unit, which is highly aligned with the company strategy and have all the functions, as Russ mentioned, sales, marketing, and so on and so forth, and operations. And give the full autonomy. It implies to the org structure, to budgeting, and to everything else.
And one more point on that one is that we are, like now that we've established all these tools and ML models and so forth, we're now taking those tools and bringing them outside of the e-commerce vision and transforming other business units. So that I think is really key. Yes, you start in this self-contained unit, but then you take down the walls and it really grows the whole firm enterprise-wide.
Yeah, an anecdotal example, these guys, they sit in a separate WeWork co-working space instead of corporate campus. When I met them first time, that was, they drink Kool-Aid, but that's fine.
So with that sort of startup mentality, there's a focus on speed and agility, right? One of the ways of our working is that we have these cross-functional working teams that we call pods. The idea is that we integrate stakeholders, engineering, and product management all within one meeting, so they can have a conversation, talk about what's working, what isn't. But also we follow a lean software development model, which is focused on eliminating waste. And waste can include unfinished projects, unneeded features, really just focusing on the things that you need to meet your goals. And this was evident when the pandemic hit. There was a need for a direct-to-consumer platform. So we were challenged by our DTC team to build a functional DTC platform within 30 days. And that's not just a website, but everything behind that website, right? The supply chain, the logistics, the data, the warehousing. And we didn't just do one storefront, but we ended up with two. We had pantryshop.com as well as snacks.com. So if you go to those websites, they're still functional today. You could order your PepsiCo products directly from there.
Yeah, and I would just want to highlight, it's not just a website, it's a whole business line launched in 30 days once pandemic started. So you can, for comparison, other enterprises, it will take 3 months just to have a plan in place, and yeah. So another item, once you start your data journey and build data products, you have to assume that there is no trust in data from business in the beginning. So it's just you have to start from scratch. All the business users have seen the reports that just don't show the right numbers, show the wrong numbers, and that must be your assumption from the beginning. Data will break the day after you deliver it to the business. Again, start from this. And important thing that data is mutable at the source. So when we build any data product, we copy data somewhere and just show to the business. But the next day, once you show it to the business, somebody in your ERP system will go back and change the numbers. So your platform must assume those mutations at the source. So we have to reconcile those numbers the day after. So a few recommendations how to establish this trust in data early on. First of all, it's ownership. So instead of having 5 different teams responsible, one for data ingestion, data collection, another for data transformation, third for data analytics, building data products, just have it in one room and give the one goal and one KPI. And so that's a very simple, it may sound a very simple two-pizza approach decision, but all of a sudden it's not the case for the most of the companies that we work with. Some technology advice, some must-have data lake, data cloud, data warehouse features and design patterns that you have to look at. It is not enough just to take data from one place, put it on the S3, connect to the Tableau, and you're done. It's not a data platform. It's not a data product. So again, you have to have managed upserts and deletes and transaction log for the data, so you can trace it back to the history, see how data is being changed over time, again, to address the use cases that I've just mentioned, that data is mutable at the source. So it's a snapshotting, time travel, keywords that I'm not going to go into details, but when you choose one technology, one data platform versus another, one vendor versus another, just look at this key aspects and manage the incremental ETL for that. Data quality and monitoring, this is not a nice-to-have feature. But you have to embed your data unit tests and some system and pipeline observability feature from the beginning. And automatic data profiling, why you need to have it automatically, because it is impossible to manually write the test for every single column, every single feature that you're going to use for your machine learning models or analytics products.
And as I mentioned, PepsiCo chose to go with a lot of open source technologies like Kubernetes, Python, Airflow. These are really powerful tools. And as I said, it kind of jumpstarts your development to be able to leverage tools like this without letting go of the control. because these are community generated efforts, PepsiCo can contribute and has contributed to open source projects to create features that we need. So you don't have to wait for some third party to develop a feature that you want. You can go in and develop it yourself.
Yeah, and every technology it's not only open source software, that's one thing, but even if you choose the vendor, if you choose a specific AWS service, for instance, it has to support open standards, meaning that you have to have an exit plan if you would like to switch one technology to another. It means that, for instance, if you have an open source data format like Parquet, you can have Redshift, you can have Snowflake, you can have Databricks, different engines to work with this data format and process data in a way that you can swap those engines and use those engines for in case they are for the best features from those engines for the different use cases, so to say. So let's dive into use cases. That was a pretty generic items that you would like to consider, but still important.
Supply chain is a pretty hot topic right now across industries, and PepsiCo is no different. One of the things that we do, we receive a lot of data from retailers regarding inventory and sales. We use that inventory data to empower our delivery team for proactive replenishment. We do forecasting, intelligence, and we also have a bi-directional communication with our field team so that they can tell us if there's any information that we wouldn't otherwise be able to gather. There's one example of being able to minimize chargebacks through simplifying the visual inspection process and quality control of packages for our supply chain team. And it had an impact of between 1% to 5% of total operating charges, just streamlining the chargeback investigation process. Along the same lines, a bit of an anecdote. My team was approached by the sales team for a given retailer to investigate the fill rate for some of our top brands and compare them to its peers. We identified a new data set that could help them with that. We got the data in the hands of the sales team quickly through the use of AWS Lambdas, Amazon SNS, and we're able to, so that they can make use of it right away. We built a data pipeline around that data, data model, and housed it in our data warehouse, and then surfaced it in a live dashboard using Apache Superset. And it's quick and scrappy, but they were able to use that data, assess the quality of the data, decide whether or not they want to continue purchasing the data or enter a contract on that data, and ultimately help plan for the shortfalls of those inventory fill rates. So being able to react quickly using these technologies is, I think, what makes it really powerful.
Yeah, what I like about this use case, so again, it's not a rocket science use case, it's pretty simple in terms of the mathematics, so to say. However, time to value, time to production, it just speaks for itself. It was very timely, and so we brought that value back to the business just immediately.
And with direct-to-consumer, I mentioned these new platforms within the e-commerce space. We unlock a lot of new types of data that we can use for product recommendations, content personalization in terms of media. We can understand consumer behavior in ways that we didn't before. And we can use that to understand how consumers interact with our brands and how we can serve them better. For example, there was some data-driven initiatives to discover new products to launch based on the consumer behaviors, social media sentiment, and different trends that were going on in culture, like keto, for example.
Great. Well, let's dive into one of the largest use cases. It's called marketing ROI engine, which is super impactful for PepsiCo, super impactful for the, I think it's going to be pretty much relevant for other industries and other enterprises as well.
Yeah, so this ROI engine, or this marketing evaluation engine, it helps us to understand where we should spend our dollars, our media dollars. Are there trade-offs between putting media in digital versus TV versus print? And it helps us evaluate how our campaigns perform. Like what are our halo effects with other products, et cetera? How did each tactic perform? So is video better than a display ad? Is it cost effective to do a video versus just a simple search, text search ad? What are the most efficient and effective tactics for media? And then also in terms of planning. So as you go from 1 year to the next, you need to understand like what the ROI was for your spending this year, so that you can project the best ways to spend that money into the future.
Yeah, and summarizing this ROI engine, KPIs and the metric that we were tracking, first of all, it's a speed, frequency, and granularity of the forecasts from months to weeks, from less frequent to more frequent. Also, in terms of the coverage, the previous solutions that, like third-party solutions that have been used, they just covered top 5 brands. Now we cover all the brands and in almost all geographies and still expanding. So that's a tremendous result. And I wanted to highlight you on this problem. So you can imagine the company like PepsiCo that has multiple brands, multiple channels that the marketing budget is being spent on, multiple geographies. So it's a very multi-dimensional problem, and with a little to zero data points that you have. So you almost don't have any first-party data, and you try to model the world without a ground truth and with a very sparse and very low data in general. So it's a very tricky mathematical problem, and it's also tricky in the way that you have to give it back to business and explain to the business why a certain media marketing mix should be applied in the next iteration for that particular brand, for particular geography. So, and each geography has its own data sources. It has its own issues with data. So it's a huge problem. And the impact-wise, you can imagine the budgets of the companies like PepsiCo, which are being spent on advertising and marketing in general. So even optimizing for a single-digit numbers percentage for these companies, it's a huge ROI.
Store analytics is another way we use data. Right, the goal is to understand, combine data sets from stores and customers, and really understand their behavior, predict the sales and trends of a given store. And Amazon Go was one example where we developed a replenishment algorithm to ensure that our using the data we received from the retailer to ensure that we were restocking inventory at an efficient rate. And so this type of analytics, it creates opportunity to provide predictions and insights on, to our sales and supply chain teams.
Nice. Yeah, and consumer analytics, it's a backbone of many other use cases, including ROI, store analytics. So the goal of the consumer analytics is to understand the customer behavior and at scale, consumers' behavior at scale. Basically, you have to build your consumer profiles, have to enrich them. You have to cluster your audience, your consumers, in a way that it's going to be applicable for the different use cases. You have to slice and dice it in the way that you want. You have to activate it afterwards, basically running different marketing campaigns, reaching out those audiences that you've built, and then you have to measure the impact at the end. So, and consumer analytics, I would say it's a baseline backbone. Without having user profiles, without having the ownership over these user profiles, you basically can't do anything. So let's quickly switch to the platform that will support this type of the use cases. Starting with the infrastructure, cloud infrastructure. We're on AWS. As we mentioned, we stick to the open source technologies like Terraform, Kubernetes, use EKS on Kubernetes on EKS. Adopted a very sophisticated and engineering-driven approach for CI/CD. It's called GitOps for both application development and data engineering and machine learning. Security compliance must-have layer fully covered by AWS fully managed services, GuardDuty inspector, secrets manager. So it just works. And some must-have features for monitoring and observability. This is our reference architecture for the for any cloud application, for any including just a generic UI applications as well as data pipelines. And so we're speaking about the data pipelines.
Yeah, I mean, we're bringing in data from all kinds of data, as I mentioned, across sales, marketing, marketing data, media, clickstream data, weather data, and all of them have different data sources. And so we have to build, custom, data pipelines to accommodate these types of things, which we can do, and we do. But what I see as a future trend is that there's going to be more of an emphasis on things like the data exchange, like the AWS data exchange, or data sharing across external partners that simplifies the ETL process. So you don't need to build an elaborate transformation. You could just import somebody else's data in the raw data form or their data warehouse model, or even the raw format, and just jumpstart your data engineering or data sourcing journey. And the advantages there, in addition to simplifying ETL, is that the data is updated in real time. That you don't have to wait for your process to run and pull it. It's as soon as it's updated in their share, you receive that data. Because building custom pipelines takes time. Our internal tooling has reduced that time greatly, but we also have made some efforts in terms of standardizing formats and encouraging data sources or data providers to use those standards.
Yeah, and I think integration with the next generation data providers like Amazon.com, if you sell through Amazon.com or sell through Amazon Go, is crucial because it's just a new way to get data through the robust API, and there are some SLAs, you can rely on your data provider, and so on and so forth. So architecture-wise, reference architecture-wise, as we mentioned, there is a structured, semi-structured, unstructured data that we load to the platform through all the ingestion mechanism that you can imagine, from simple SFTP data sharing to custom web scrapers that pull data from the web pages, to some more like industry standards methods for capturing data from databases, as Teradata, SAP databases, MySQL databases. So all the variety of the methods. The important thing, as I mentioned, so the data is being landed on the commoditized storage, S3 storage with the open format, Parquet, with some processing and pre-processing that makes it more useful. And then we can have a freedom, we can democratize and use different engines to process that data later, Snowflake, Spark, Druid for real-time use cases, and this all is being orchestrated by dbt and Airflow. Consumer-wise, of course, one of the first consumer of the data is machine learning, data science, and analytics team that use Jupyter notebooks and Kubeflow-based machine learning pipelines to build the machine learning applications. I explicitly mentioned the just general applications here because this is what we see across the industry, and this is what's been really helpful for PepsiCo to bridge that gap between data science and business and give some user-friendly UI, user experience to the business to interact with machine learning workflow. So as a business user, you can specify some parameters, so to say, that you would like to use to train the model or to query the model or query the results, and have that drag and drop no-code interface to really explore, for instance, the ROI engine. You can, as a business user, you can define the target, define the geography, define the brand, define some assumptions that you have, click through run the training, get the model, observe the predictions, and make an informal decision if it's suitable for you or not. Or you can just go back and reiterate it again and again. So that's the vision. It's of course there are still some gaps, but this is what I see across the industry. So you do not have just data scientists being data science as a service. You know, when the data scientists are being tasked by the business to run a specific model, instead of doing that, let's build a nice UI and hand it off to the business user. So, we spoke quite a bit of about the startup culture and how to bootstrap things. But let's see how we can scale it across the enterprise. So covering other business units, other geographies, other teams, because PepsiCo is a global enterprise. So the stack that we described, from the infrastructure level to data level, is a reusable stack that you can deploy many times in many geographies for a lot of different domains. So, and how it looks at scale. So you may split it by domain, you may split it by project, you may split it by team. It just depends on your business. But you will have decentralized data domains and multiple platform instances. So you can have it. And you can give a full autonomy to different teams that will have their own use cases, but they will use pretty much the same stack, which is managed by the infrastructure team. And to make it to make the next step further, you have to have a cross-domain unified metadata layer that will help you to discover and govern the data between the domains. So for instance, if a specific team in Latin America working on a supply chain automation would need data from marketing, there should be a common way to discover and share that data between those domains and teams. So this is how you make it, how you scale it further, and without losing the autonomy and without losing the data ownership.
Yeah, so in regards to the autonomy and the data ownership, there are techniques like data mesh that are, create data as a product that makes it easier to share across different owners. But one of the choices that we made in terms of our warehousing strategy is to implement a data vault schema. So data vault schema is similar to star schema. It's a highly normalized way of structuring your data, but it allows for flexibility, auditability, and discovery in ways that other strategies don't. As opposed to just putting all your data in a data lake, and then whenever you want to start working with it, you've got to like assemble something from that data. The Data Vault provides a unified view. It provides structure to the raw files, right? So you've got like data tables to work with directly, but it's a unified way of looking at data in terms of hubs, which are kind of like reusable pieces of data, or common pieces of data where, regardless of the source, you would have those common points, something like products or locations or stores. That could be an example of a hub. Regardless of whether you're dealing with sales data or supply chain data, you would have that one table to use across domains. And it helps you share models across teams and projects when you have data structured that way. In addition, to be able to, if you're a developer and you come into a new data warehouse, you have no idea what the tables mean. Maybe you lost the documentation, but if you have this common language of, okay, hubs, links, satellites, you understand how the data works together and how it meshes. We also use dbt to do some of that transformation documentation. So those two things work powerfully together. But ultimately, the most powerful aspect of it, of Data Vault, is the auditability of it, and being able to bring data in its rawest form into the data warehouse, and then build on that. So there's no question of, okay, if the data looks wrong on the business intelligence side, where did the transformation occur that caused an issue? Is it when we brought the file into the data warehouse? No, not likely, because we've tested and verified that all that data is in its rawest, purest form in the data warehouse.
Yeah, just to summarize, it's not a silver bullet. You can mix and match different data warehouse techniques, schemas, star schema, the Data Vault schema, but there are certain use cases, especially in a finance, that you would probably need to look at that technique of a highly normalized enterprise data warehouse schema. Moving to the outcomes and lessons learned.
Yeah, so some of the lessons we learned, after making a migration to the cloud, we had some legacy systems that were already in place. And we noticed that having two systems in place required making changes twice, right? So every change that we have to make it on our new system. We also have to make it in our old system, our legacy system, until we can decommission that legacy system. So focusing resources to decommission legacy systems as soon as you can will pay off in the long run, because those resources are then freed up to work on new initiatives and new things that have an impact or add value to the business. Things like containerization, it's Docker or whatever, Kubernetes. It allows. It takes dependencies out of the equation, right? You can standardize the tools you work with, and you can know that when you deploy code from your local environment, your locally running container, that it's going to work in production just the same way that it worked in your local workstation. And another thing that I thought, I think the transformation into cloud changes culture and the way of thinking, is that cloud enables more risk-taking, right? You can take chances with cloud that you wouldn't if you had to think about like, all the upfront costs of an on-premises system, or all these legacy systems. You can tackle these problems on a smaller scale and then build on that, right? So it encourages you to take more chances, do more things, and find more opportunities to add value. And that helps with leadership buy-in as well. If there's less risk, then it's more likely your leadership will say, yeah, maybe this is a good strategy. Maybe we should try this new way of working. And that can help shape your company's culture to adopt new ways of using machine learning or using data in new ways. And once you've got that leadership buy-in, you can build the trust of not just leadership, but also your peers and your stakeholders by delivering value. Like reducing time to value, reducing the amount of time it takes to develop a solution helps people understand and trust that you're capable of adding value to the firm, to the business in those ways. And in this case, I put this comic here because it illustrates a common mistake, I think, with people take with data engineering in general and data structuring. I consider data engineering and machine learning development on par or equivalent to software development and software engineering in general. You need to follow best practices. You need to follow good structure. Write good code, clean code, maintainable, scalable code. Otherwise, you're going to have essentially a house of cards that nobody understands, and as soon as somebody goes on vacation, everything collapses. So really, you want to build good systems and have a robust data platform so that you avoid these types of issues.
Yeah, again, writing a couple of scripts that move data from one place to another is not a data platform. You just need to be a little bit more strategic about that.
One example that we came up with, I mentioned standardizing data formats. We came up with this idea of a fast track for data. So establishing some standard formats and schemas that if a supplier can accommodate you or an internal stakeholder can accommodate that format, you can streamline development for ingesting and processing that data. So if you've got a standard input, a predictable input, you can reduce development time significantly. And we coordinate with our sales and business intelligence teams so that if there's a new, smaller customer, like for example, with a lot of these e-convenience businesses in the marketplace, they might be small, but it would help to have them integrated with our business intelligence systems. And so in order to get them into the system without needing to deprioritize other work, you can have a solution like this to integrate them more quickly.
Yeah, again, as of on a previous slide, writing a bunch of scripts is not a data platform, and also just dropping a CSV file into S3 is also not a data lake. So you have to build the schemas and to streamline the communication and the data movement across the different teams, externally, internally. So it's one of the attributes of the robust data and machine learning infrastructure.
And finally, the cultural transformation. Once you've made this type of a migration, you're getting leadership buy-in early really helps to drive change and accept new ways of working with this technology, right? Cloud technologies, the scalability, the pace and agility, it can change the way that people work, and that's a good thing. So getting everybody on board is a really powerful step. And integrating technology with every function. It shouldn't, technology shouldn't exist in a vacuum. We solve problems, and you need to understand the use cases that you're working to solve. Empowering our engineers to make choices. So this, I think, is really key. And engineers, if they need somebody to approve, they need to submit an idea for approvals from their manager or their manager's manager, that slows things down. And if you're trying to move quickly, you want to empower people to make those choices, where necessary. And that goes to the next step of establishing trust by moving quickly and delivering those results. It's a reinforcing cycle where once you start on this process of getting things done quickly and being agile, it's self-fulfilling. But you also need to set expectations appropriately, because if people are used to things that were planned years in advance, when you're moving quickly, things break, and folks need to understand that they will get fixed, but there is this period of iteration and development that it needs to go through, and that's the best way, I think, to solve problems.
Yeah, I want to add, this is really long-term strategic thing. You cannot measure a cultural transformation in any form. You cannot put the KPI, this is just one thing, one culture, this is another culture. And I think it requires really bold and strong top-down vision and decision just to have it happen. By working with PepsiCo, with the leadership, we never been asked and questioned what's going to be the outcome of a specific short-term project. It's never the case. You have to be more strategic about that. You have to launch many use cases. We have to believe. It's more about belief rather than calculating ROI on a specific short-term project. So and the cultural, I think in terms of the outcome that you guys got, the culture is something that you've learned through the technology, learned through the data, learned through all this, the use cases that you have implemented.
Yeah, thank you everybody for attending. Should we take questions
Yeah,
now, or I think we can be available in the hallway if you prefer.
Yeah. Well,
Do you have any questions? Yeah, go ahead. Yep.
Hey guys, thanks so much for a great presentation. You mentioned earlier that you wanted to, you structured this e-com group as a startup within Pepsi. And I'm curious, you mentioned all the functional areas that you kind of stood up as part of that effort. In most large organizations, IT organizations are kind of like gigantic rules engines. They're really brittle and they have these ancient policies that nobody really understands. And I'm curious if, in your instance, you created a shadow IT organization or if you worked through the existing IT organization. And whichever, and if you borrowed some capability, I'm really curious how that went. So.
What essentially happened was, thank you for that question. So the question is, well, I guess everyone heard it, but yeah, so what happened was we got dispensations from our IT rules engine to work in a new way and take on these new technologies that may or may not have fit existing corporate policies. But by getting those dispensations, it's not like we were operating completely out of oversight. People were watching and monitoring from the enterprise IT perspective to make sure that we weren't doing anything dangerous or that would risk the brand as a whole. But that's a really good point.
Yeah, that was super tough decision, and thanks for asking. And I don't want to speak on behalf of PepsiCo management, but as an external person, I really admit that strong belief. And yeah, that was a shadow IT basically. Now it is converging. Now it's just reusing all the great things that have been created in that e-commerce group. And for instance, ROI use case, it is not an e-commerce use case, it's a global use case that is being used by retail, brick and mortar, and others. Supply chain, same thing, horizontal. So the idea is if you have one end-to-end like business unit successful, why not to start moving other business units to the same culture, same process, same technology.
Any other questions? Yeah. Well, thank you. Well, we'll be available in the hallway if you have any follow-ups. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.